Early life and background. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was born on August 15, 1944, in Ntungamo district in southwestern Uganda. He comes from the Banyankole ethnic group, which is known for cattle keeping. His father, Amos Kaguta, was a cattle herder, and Museveni grew up in a rural setting where traditional values and farming shaped daily life. He attended Enter School in Mbarara, a well-known secondary school that also educated future Rwandan President Paul Kagame. After completing his early education, Museveni went to the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, where he studied political science and economics. During his time at university, he became involved in political activism and student movements. He was influenced by ideas of African unity, socialism, and anti-colonial struggle, drawing inspiration from leaders like Julius Nyerere and the writings of Karl Marx and Frantz Fanon. These experiences and ideas played a key role in shaping his political views and future actions as a revolutionary leader. If you find this helpful, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more information on African history and leaders. Entry into Ugandan politics. Yoweri Museveni entered Ugandan politics during a time of great turmoil and change. In 1971, the Ugandan army commander Idi Amin overthrew President Milton Obote in a military coup. Museveni, who had previously worked in Obote's government and security services, strongly opposed Amin's dictatorship. He fled into exile and began organizing resistance against the new regime. While in exile, Museveni formed a rebel group called the Front for National Salvation (FRNASA). This group fought alongside Tanzanian forces and other Ugandan exiles to remove Idi Amin from power. In 1979, Amin was overthrown by this coalition, and Museveni returned to Uganda. He was appointed Minister of Defense in the transitional government that followed. However, political instability continued. In 1980, national elections were held, which Museveni and many others believed were rigged in favor of Milton Obote, who returned to power. In response, Museveni rejected the outcome and decided to launch a guerrilla war to remove Obote and restore what he called true democracy. This marked the beginning of his armed struggle for leadership and deeper involvement in Uganda's political and military affairs. Rise to power. After the disputed 1980 elections, Yoweri Museveni began an armed rebellion against the new government led by Milton Obote. He formed the National Resistance Army (NRA), a guerrilla force made up of fighters loyal to his cause. Museveni and his supporters launched a 5-year war, often called the Bush War or Luera War, named after the area where much of the fighting took place. During this time, the NRA used guerrilla tactics to weaken the government forces, slowly gaining territory and support from rural communities. The war was brutal and caused many deaths and displacements, but Museveni's forces remained determined. In 1985, Obote was overthrown by his own generals, but the new military government was weak and short-lived. In January 1986, after years of fighting, the NRA successfully captured the capital city, Kampala. Museveni was sworn in as President of Uganda on January 29, 1986. He promised to bring peace, end corruption, and rebuild the country. His rise to power marked the beginning of a new era in Ugandan politics, with Museveni at the center of national leadership. Presidency. Early years 1986-1995. When Yoweri Museveni became president in 1986, Uganda was in a state of crisis. Years of war, dictatorship, and economic collapse had left the country deeply damaged. Museveni and his National Resistance Movement (NRM) promised to bring stability, national unity, and development. In his early years, Museveni focused on rebuilding government institutions, reviving the economy, and improving security. His leadership was widely praised both inside Uganda and by the international community. Museveni introduced a unique political system known as the movement system. Under this system, political parties were restricted, and all Ugandans were considered members of the movement, which was intended to promote unity rather than division by party. He argued that multi-party politics had caused conflict in the past and that Uganda first needed national healing and development. In 1995, a new constitution was adopted. It introduced democratic reforms and included term limits for the presidency. This period is often remembered as a time of optimism and progress in Uganda's recovery, as Museveni appeared to bring peace and order after years of chaos. Constitution changes and elections 1996-2005. In 1996, Uganda held its first presidential election under the new constitution. Yoweri Museveni ran as a candidate under the movement system and won by a large majority. Although political parties were still restricted, the election was seen as a major step toward formal democracy. Museveni continued to focus on rebuilding the country, expanding education, improving health services, and attracting foreign investment. His government was also praised for its strong response to the HIV/AIDS crisis. However, concerns about growing authoritarianism began to appear. In 2001, Museveni was re-elected, but opposition figures and observers raised questions about the fairness of the elections. Around this time, political pressure grew to allow the return of full multi-party politics. Museveni agreed, and in 2005 a national referendum was held, allowing political parties to operate again. That same year, the Ugandan parliament made a major constitutional change. It removed the two-term limit for presidents. This move allowed Museveni to run for a third term in 2006, which critics saw as a step away from democracy and a sign that he intended to stay in power indefinitely. Museveni defended the change, saying the country still needed his leadership to stay on the path of development. Multi-party elections and continued rule 2006-2016. Following the return to multi-party politics, Uganda held its first fully competitive presidential election in 2006. Yoweri Museveni ran as the candidate for the National Resistance Movement (NRM) and won against opposition leader Kizza Besigye. Besigye had once been Museveni's ally and doctor during the Bush War but had since become one of his strongest critics. The election was marked by heavy security presence, accusations of vote rigging, and the arrest of opposition members, leading to concerns about fairness and political freedom. Museveni continued to win elections in 2011 and 2016, both times against a divided opposition. During these years, his government maintained economic growth and carried out major infrastructure projects like road construction and energy expansion. However, critics accused Museveni of using state institutions and security forces to control the political space, silence dissent, and weaken democratic institutions. At the same time, Museveni positioned himself as a regional leader and peacekeeper. He sent Ugandan troops to support peace missions in countries like Somalia and South Sudan, gaining international support, especially from Western allies. Despite his growing international role, many Ugandans and observers expressed concern over the erosion of democracy and the concentration of power in the presidency. Age limit removal in the 2021 election. By 2017, Yoweri Museveni had been in power for over 30 years. According to Uganda's constitution, the age limit for a presidential candidate was 75 years. Since Museveni was approaching this age, the law would have prevented him from running again in 2021. However, in a highly controversial move, Parliament voted to remove the presidential age limit from the constitution. The decision sparked protests, both in Parliament and across the country, with many Ugandans accusing Museveni of trying to make himself president for life. Despite public opposition, the age limit was officially removed, and Museveni was free to run for another term. In the 2021 election, he faced a strong challenge from a new and much younger opponent, Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine. Bobi Wine, a popular musician turned politician, attracted large crowds, especially among the youth, and called for an end to Museveni's long rule. The campaign period was tense and violent. Security forces cracked down on opposition rallies, arrested Bobi Wine multiple times, and were accused of using excessive force. On election day, the government shut down the internet and restricted media access. When results were announced, Museveni was declared the winner, claiming over 58% of the vote. Bobi Wine rejected the results, calling the election fraudulent, and many international observers raised concerns about the fairness of the process. Despite the controversy, Museveni remained in power, continuing his presidency into its fourth decade. Legacy and impact. Yoweri Museveni is one of the longest-serving presidents in Africa and the longest in Uganda's history. His leadership has had a deep and lasting impact on the country. Supporters credit him with bringing peace and stability to Uganda after years of civil war and dictatorship. Under his rule, the economy grew, infrastructure developed, and access to education and healthcare improved. Museveni also gained international respect for his role in regional peacekeeping and efforts to fight HIV/AIDS. However, his presidency is also heavily criticized. Over time, Museveni has been accused of weakening democracy, silencing the opposition, and using security forces to stay in power. The removal of term and age limits, as well as repeated allegations of election rigging and human rights violations, have led many to view him as an authoritarian leader. His long stay in power has raised concerns about leadership transition and the future of Uganda's political system. Museveni's legacy is complex. To some, he is a liberator and builder of modern Uganda. To others, he is a ruler who abandoned democratic principles to hold on to power. Whatever view one takes, his influence on Uganda's history and politics is undeniable.